what we have seen is the deepfake fraud as a percentage of overall fraud attempts. In 2022, 0.1%. 2021, 0.29%. 2023, 2.52%. And 2024, just like the first 2 months of 2024, 6.5%. Fraudsters are becoming much more sophisticated.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick Lambert. I'm the CEO of Doc, and welcome to Identi3, a podcast all about identity and Web3. And it's my pleasure today to be joined by Pinar Alpay. Pinar is the Chief Product and Chief Marketing Officer of Signicat. Welcome, Pinar, and many thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Nick, and hi everyone that's listening, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really delighted.
Oh, it's very much our pleasure. And actually, Francisco and I were chatting beforehand. This is episode number 25 for us, so a little bit of a milestone, and it's great that you're part of that. So without further ado, Pinar, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself and Signicat to our listeners?
Of course. Thanks, Nick. So as Nick said, my name is Pinar Alpay, and I'm Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Signicat. I'm based in London, and I have been at Signicat for almost 2 years now. In April, it's going to be 2 years. And before Signicat, I worked at WorldPay, FIS for about 7 years. And even before that, I started my career at Bain & Company. I worked there for about 9 years, and then at Barclaycard as Head of Strategy and Planning. And I had my own business for a while as well, producing children's animation films for speech and language. And a bit about Signicat. Signicat is the pan-European leader of digital identity solutions. And we are headquartered in Norway, but we have we have 16 offices in 14 countries. Our solutions cover the entire digital identity lifecycle. And when I say digital identity lifecycle, I mean all the way from compliant identity proofing to secure authentication to high level of assurance, electronic signatures, and orchestration. Our orchestration products primarily support remote digital onboarding to digitize and automate the more complex KYC and KYB processes while lowering fraud. It may or may not come with a signature at the end that's legally binding, depending on the needs of our customers.
Yes, thanks for that intro, Pinar. It's amazingly varied a career that you've had. It seemed like there's a couple of different payment providers that are kind of finance use cases that you were involved in with some of those companies. But then the own segue into children's animations, which is a very diverse and very different career. So it's been very eclectic for you so far.
Yeah, it has. But I could say that especially the sort of children's animation business, that was the sort of defining moment for me to get into product management.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. We'll definitely get into exploring that one as well. That's an interesting way to get into it, isn't it?
Yes.
I was actually going to ask you about another defining moment. And that was going to be around identity. So like we said at the intro, CMO and CPO of Signicat, what got you first interested in digital identity?
So there was no defining moment for me to get into digital identity. Things just evolved for me into digital identity. But for getting into payments was more of a conscious choice for me. I joined WorldPay when it was still a scale-up. It was owned by private equity owners, and it was a fantastic time where we sort of grew the company, really fast-paced environment. And then a couple of years later, we IPO'd. Then we got acquired by a company called Ventive, and then we got acquired by a company called FIS. And suddenly, WorldPay was part of an 80,000 person company. It's now sort of changed. Of course, everything has changed now. WorldPay is back on the sort of private company track. It has been spun off from FIS. But during those times, I was actually yearning for the sort of early days of WorldPay, where it was still scale up and more fast-paced environment. And at that time, Signicat came along, and the mission of Signicat, building trust in the digital world, um, made me sort of think a bit more about identity, and made me really intrigued, because I think identity is now what payments was like about 10 years ago. And there are so many parallels between identity and payments. And I'm so glad I made the leap, because both Signicat as a company is fantastic, but the identity area is so, so interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of different facets to it as well, isn't it? And everyone has a very, can lead you. It's a topic that you think would be very business orientated, but actually there's a lot of philosophical questions that it can raise as well. So, yeah, it's definitely a topic that everyone can find something interesting in it, I think, and because it's a big part of all our lives online.
Yes.
Identity is really foundational and fundamental. And I think sometimes you don't really realize that until you're actually in it. And then you
Yes.
realize how important it is. And it sounds like
Yes.
you've maybe had a similar journey.
Yeah, I did.
Looking at Signicat then, so you're involved in two very large scale EU digital identity wallet pilots.
Yeah.
It's something we've talked about a little bit with other guests on the podcast. Could you tell me what Signicat are involved in there, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as part of course, the next stage of eIDAS 2, EU is funding 4 large-scale pilot consortiums. And these consortiums are formed by both governmental and industrial organizations, and they are approved for EU funding. And Signicat is involved in 2 large-scale pilots, and we are sort of playing a lead role in those. The first one is EWC, which is EU Digital Identity Wallet Consortium, and the second one is NOBIT, which is the Nordic Baltic eID project. The EWC represents pretty much every country in the EU and EFTA. It's led by Swedish and Finnish authorities, and the focus is travel across Europe and supporting payments. The NOBIT consortium members are Denmark, Germany, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, and Norway, and the focus will be payments through the wallets across Europe. Our role in the large-scale pilots is to shape how wallets should be on a technical, technological, and regulatory levels, and also to define and also build the use cases, the first proof of concepts of the use cases.
And how have you found the collaboration? Because it's something, Doc, have been involved in some different EU projects, kind of more EBSI, European blockchain infrastructure stuff. And it's, as a technology provider, it can also be challenging, these projects, because you're actually working hand in hand with what you might see in every day as a competitor, like another technology provider, and you're all trying to work on the same thing together. How have you found that? I don't know if you're directly involved in these projects. I would imagine you would be. Have you found that challenging? I know I certainly found that an unusual environment to work in.
It is very unusual. It's quite challenging, not only because of you are working collaboratively with competitors, etc., but also because there are the sheer number of people that are involved from different interest groups, and harnessing all that to go in a certain direction is challenging. But I think it's also going to be quite rewarding for the future.
Yeah.
I think that the future of digital identity is being shaped in those consortiums, and everybody is working toward a common goal. Maybe just trying to sort of like shift it in the direction that they want, but I think at the end everybody wants an interoperable environment where different business models can emerge.
Yeah, I think one of the great things that we've heard from other guests is that specifically the European Identity Wallet, that there's actually organizations waiting there, and nation states presumably also, that are actually wanting to start building real things with it.
Yes.
So these pilots are particularly exciting because it's not a pilot for a pilot's sake. There's legitimately businesses waiting to adopt the outcome of these pilots, which I think makes the pilots much more meaningful, that they are done correctly.
I think the important thing is to find real use cases, because that's going to determine whether a certain wallet takes off or not. solving a customer's pain point, users as well as the organization's pain point, is going to be key. And that's going to determine the success of this.
Absolutely. So let's get into that then. The kind of looking at eIDAS, which for the uninitiated, I think most people are familiar, the kind of electronic identification and trust services kind of project. What do you see, Pinar, as the biggest and most significant opportunities that eIDAS and then the EU Digital Wallet project, what are the biggest opportunities they present to businesses?
Yeah, lots, I think. As you know, eIDAS 1 was really great in defining the level of assurance for identification and digital signatures and trust services. But what it wasn't successful in was pushing the member states to create these national eIDs, and also the national eIDs in the context of a cross-border single digital market. And what eIDAS 2 is trying to do is to change this. And the aim is to deploy a national eID scheme for all EU member states, and then also make sure that there is acceptance of these eIDs by public and private sectors, and also enhance the usage of that in a cross-border basis. So these EU wallets will be made available to all EU citizens and residents and businesses by the member states. So the EU digital identity wallets then would enable the sort of easy authentication or access to public services even across borders. And many private services are going to have to accept the EU digital identity wallets. For example, banks, payment providers that require, and other use cases, right, that require strong customer authentication. Yeah. So what we will see is, wallets will have the functionality to have, for example, electronic signatures at different strength levels. They're going to be able to store and share credentials such as, driver's license or work permits or insurance cards, etc. So there's a lot of use cases here that can be super helpful to users. And we will see the wallets enabling these digital identities across Europe. And that will basically enable a lot of cross-border activity in the EU, and probably also improve EU-wide competitiveness for pan-European businesses. And it might even encourage some businesses that were maybe limited by the national boundaries to operate across borders. And then for users, this cheaper onboarding of users across borders is going to increase competition. But then, digital challenges might emerge that serve customers better. And I think overall, there's a lot of opportunities here for businesses to operate.
Yeah, definitely
in bigger landscapes.
I think one of the great things I hear, and I agree with, I kind of heard this, I can't remember who it was that said it, but when I heard it, I think that's absolutely right, where it's really good that companies are getting engaged, and actually the EU are engaging with them, because if you had wallets used by citizens that were only for government use cases, services that are maybe accessed maybe just a handful of times per year, it really would not make that much of a difference. It would kind of fail, right? So if you needed to do it every time you had to, file a tax return or, access some kind of government service, then that would really be limiting. But if you have companies coming in, whether it's the travel use cases you mentioned, airlines, educational use cases, it makes it something that's going to be used or has the potential to be used all the time. And when that happens, that's when it will really become successful and people will actually start to understand it. Then if it's something that you use, I know if there's anything I'm doing like a handful of times a year, I probably have to remind myself how to do it every single time. Yeah. But if I'm actually using that thing every week or every day, it'll just become absolutely second nature. And I think that's going to lead to its success, hopefully.
Exactly. And it's all about creating that need and making sure, thinking about those use cases. Let's say you're going on holiday and you need to rent a car. Imagine you had your digital wallet, which included all your driver's information, your insurance, it had your bank cards in it, and then you just tapped it at the sort of counter, and then all of everything was, just done
Yeah.
out of your wallet, and you didn't have to carry any of these things anymore.
Yeah, and then the car rental agency could put back, I don't know, so could attach some kind of loyalty scheme into that as well, and then you could start getting kind of points amassed into
Yeah.
your wallet also. So yeah,
Yes.
the use cases are fantastic.
Yeah.
So looking at the opportunities for businesses, then how do you think more broadly decentralized digital identity will impact the identity landscape? So obviously these wallets are in many cases self-custodial, meaning that the
Yes.
individual can now control them.
Yeah.
They're not beholden to a company for being able to use them, or a company or a country. How do you think that aspect is going to impact digital identity?
Yeah, I think that we will definitely see individuals more control of the data that they share externally. And the key thing is for the individual to trust in this, and to believe that the data that they hold is, or the data that's in the wallet is secure and not accessible by unauthorized actors. And instilling that trust in the user is going to be key, because although some markets, citizens in some markets are um, using digital identities already for everything, like in the Nordics or maybe Central Europe, Baltics, etc. Other markets there's a lot more distrust in other markets, let's put it that way. For example, in Germany, there's a lot of distrust in the digital environment, and a lot of things are still done in person or with paper. So if the individual can trust that their data is secure, then there are so many use cases for the digital transactions, and that's going to make user experience much more smooth for the users to conduct business remotely. And that in turn is going to create a lot more use cases as well.
And it's interesting. I mean, Doc speak to spoken to Signicat a couple of times, and speaking to different companies from different parts of Europe and the world. And to pick up on your point, that you get people in Germany maybe that are less trusting of the government, just because of things that happened in the past.
Yeah.
You find like in the Nordics, they're very trusting of the government because they've not had necessarily particularly bad experiences. And that's what I was kind of meaning at the start about like political and maybe philosophical differences in identity, differences of opinion can lead you to, be interested in different aspects of it, and can also lead an entire nation to form their opinion of what identity is. And so this is a very fascinating topic. And so
Yes.
is your experience also that within the Nordics are much more trusting of these kind of government-backed identity schemes, and that in other parts of Europe, like Germany and I guess parts of Asia, they're maybe less so, and
Yeah.
the education has to be different there?
Absolutely. For example, in Germany, they have the sort of government-issued Neue Personalausweis, but a lot of Germans have never activated it. They don't know their PIN, and hence they need to, whenever they are onboarding remotely, let's say, to a banking service, they need to go through this video identification process with a sort of potential penny drop or micropayment to identify themselves, right? There's a lot of friction in the process, even though providers can make that process super smooth, right? So, for example, Signicat has fully automated video identification tools in Germany that can sort of really reach very high levels of conversion. Still, though, in the market, there are some providers that use agents that need to interview the user in order to onboard them into a digital service. But in the Nordics, the eIDs are used for this purpose. Every citizen has one. They use it in everyday life to do every single thing. and and yeah, in the German market, I think definitely some education is needed, but also trust building that their data is actually really secure and only accessible by them.
Yeah, and in the UK where I'm based as well, like we have shunned national ID schemes many times, and so
Yeah.
it's I guess we're somewhat in the middle, but yeah, it's definitely not something that comes naturally to your average person living in the UK. So I guess that's going to lead to different EU member states adopting at different scales and different
Yes.
speeds. It's going to be harder
Yes.
for some than it is for others, for sure.
Yes, and I think that I will again sort of talk about the use cases and the appeal of those use cases, right? You know, if the use cases are attractive enough, people will start trying out, and then trust is going to build, and then I think then there's going to be like a scale effect.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking then a bit more at your own background, Pinar, as well, and the role that you kind of work on at Signicat, there's quite a lot of product leaders and kind of CMOs that also listen to this show. So I wanted just to understand your role a little bit deeper,
Hmm.
what kind of a day in the life almost looks like for you. But before we do that, you'd said something interesting at the start about how you got into product management, and it was through child animation. So before I forget, now would seem like a great
Yeah.
chance for you to tell that story. So how did you get into product management?
Well, I think it was again with this company that I set up to encourage speech and language in children. And that was basically born through personal need. I wanted my daughter had a delay in speaking, and she was getting speech therapy, but I wanted to supplement that with other things, and so to accelerate that process. And then I had the idea of working with her speech therapist to produce films that are interactive and that could encourage children to speak. And that's how it was born. And I launched the sort of first film within 6 months. And, of course, I was a one-man show, all doing everything from, production to scripting to marketing to, sales and everything. But it actually gave me great experience in product management. And then I discovered that I really like it. And that's how I decided, okay, my next thing is also going to be about product management.
Very interesting. And then you also get the marketing stuff in as well. So
Yes,
yeah, it sounds like it gave you a ton of different experience.
yes.
Yeah, and with your role at Signicat as the Chief Product Officer, looking at that part specifically, what are some of the main kind of key performance indicators? Like how do you understand what success looks like within Signicat, and how do you try and evaluate that?
Yeah, of course. It's all about the customers for us. I look at KPIs in four categories, but the first one is customer impact. We measure our impact on our customers with the KPIs that are critical across the digital identity lifecycle that I just talked about. So, for example, in identity proofing, we look at our conversion rates. We also measure fraud costs that we decrease. In orchestration, we measure the cost of onboarding that we reduce, or the onboarding time that we squeeze. For example, in a sort of KYB process, a business onboarding could take, you know, weeks, and with automated onboarding, it can sort of be as little as a few seconds or minutes. In authentication, we measure authentication success rate. In signatures, we measure signature conversion as well as the carbon footprint that we reduce. For example, our customers can increase their conversion rates by 19 percentage points and reduce their fraud costs by 75% by working with us. The other KPI types that I look at are, for example, customer usage, so penetration of the different products in our product portfolio. So, for example, our customers, two-thirds of our customers use more than two products at Signicat. And we also sort of measure satisfaction KPIs like product NPS. I also look at financial KPIs to measure the commercial success of the products as well as operational. So, and what I mean by operational is, for example, the sort of metrics about the efficiency of our team, like velocity, predictability, etc.
I suppose the great thing as well, Pinar, about looking at those metrics in that way is that you then, in your other role with your chief marketing officer hat on, those are great things, as long as the numbers look good, of course, but
Yeah,
they're then great things to go and market because it's demonstrating the value of the product that you're building as well. So not only is it good for you to, see are we being successful, but then look, we are being successful and now we have results that we can clearly define and show.
absolutely. And of course, we measure these impacts ourselves, but it was important for us to be able to get those measures also attested by third parties as well. So last year we worked with Forrester on doing a report called Total Economic Impact. And Forrester interviewed 5 of our customers and created a composite organization. And they measured the economic impact that Signicat has in for our customers in working with us. And they basically the numbers that I gave you, the 19 percentage points increase in conversion, for example, or 75% fraud cost saved, they are all also part of Forrester's findings. And all in all, Forrester found that our customers get a return on investment of 303% by working with Signicat, and the payback period that's less than 6 months. And we are very proud of that. We of course measure all of those with our customers individually, but it was actually great for Forrester to you know basically rubber stamp that.
Of course, it gives you a lot of credibility
Yeah.
because, of course, you're going to be positive about what Signicat's doing, but it's. I think it's important for not only you guys but also your customers to get that kind of third party kind of tick. So absolutely makes sense. Fraud came up in your answer there, Pinar, and I think that everyone in the identity space is hyper aware of fraud.
Yes.
It's certainly growing rapidly. What are some of the examples of the most sophisticated fraud attempts that you and your team have encountered, and how do you guys think about trying to deal with that in the future? What types of things are you doing to try and mitigate
Yeah.
or prevent fraud on your platform?
Great question, and it's a super current issue for us. And there are many examples, right? So one example is, for example, a large gaming company experiencing a spike in fraudulent account applications. They experience 20,000 in a month, and that's basically appeared like fraudsters were utilizing what appeared to be harvested German personal information from February 2023. So what we've done is we deployed an orchestrated workflow that triangulated the metadata signals from multiple sources in real time. And this was at minimal additional cost to our customers. That resulted in immediate removal of these spikes. But what we are seeing, I think the most important trend that we are seeing lately is the rise in AI-driven fraud and deepfakes. And I was looking at this data very recently because we are in the process of doing a research piece in AI-driven fraud. And we analyzed the data from our video ID products, like more than 14 million data points, and over the last 3 years. And what we have seen is the deepfake fraud as a percentage of overall fraud attempts, right? I'm just giving you some of the data that we have. In 2022, 0.1%. 2021, 0.29%. 2023, 2.52%. And 2024, just like the first 2 months of 2024, 6.5%. So the fraudsters are becoming much more sophisticated. They're using Gen AI, but we are also using Gen AI. So I think it's all about using technology. Fraudsters are using technology, but we also are using technology to be always one step ahead of fraudsters with more and more sophisticated defense mechanisms. So all of this is, of course, feeding into our data sets, and we're sort of always training our machine learning models to catch all of these new ways of fraud cases. But Signicat as an organization, we have sort of this multifaceted approach to combat fraud. It starts with the sort of identity proofing stage, where you sort of look at, for example, the velocity or the device associations, etc., to kick out fraud in the first instance, and then doing this really sort of sophisticated eIDV methods that are powered by machine learning. And then in cases of eIDs, like eIDs, for example, are or traditionally have been considered quite secure, but we also see in the Nordic countries eID fraud, right? And when you identify a risky login attempt, it's a matter of stepping up the security from a traditional eID to maybe sort of other methods like information lookups or corroboration, etc. And then, of course, that the orchestration solutions that have anti-fraud measures in them.
Yeah, it's interesting when you it's that arms race, isn't it? Of using AI to fight AI. It definitely seems like that's going to go on for some considerable time.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think people are often very negative about AI, and for me, it's just a technology. Like there's no like positive or negative. It's down to how people use it, and so there are some very positive aspects to it, and one of those is obviously using it for fraud detection as well. So,
yes.
Do you ever think, like, I don't know if maybe one does exist, and it could be my ignorance, Pinar, where actually, whether you're training your own model or even being able to have some kind of consortium of identity providers, verification providers who are actually sharing some of these fraud attempts in order that industry becomes a lot smarter, because I'm sure you're seeing similar things in different companies. Does something like that exist, or would you see a future where that can exist?
I know some industries are doing that, for example, insurance or loan, etc. But in the identity space, of course, we need to be super mindful of GDPR and make sure that the data that we use is consented and respecting the user's right to privacy. So, we don't have that at this stage, but potentially, of course, if there's proper consent, why not? I think this is something that could potentially be useful to the industry.
Yeah, of course. Or if it could be anonymized in some way, but that makes sense. So talking about innovations then and looking forward, what are the innovations that you're most excited about, either within Signicat or within the identity space more broadly, in terms of how it can, impact fraud prevention? Mm-hmm. So we talked about using AI for that. Are there any others, or did you want to expand on that at all?
I think AI is going to be the starter for many innovations in the identity space, that's for sure. But I think that the reusable identities that are, I think, somehow to do with the EU digital identity wallet space, but also quite independent from that as well, are sort of really interesting developments in identity that could really change the way that we manage our identities in the future. These the decentralized identities, the identities that you can establish once and then reuse across multiple organizations and multiple use cases, I think they are really going to be reshaping the way we see identity.
And of course, it makes it, when you get those reusable portable identities, it makes it hypercritical that the first verification is accurate and spot on, because then obviously you get like fraud on fraud on fraud. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
think, but yeah, it's
First
obviously,
verification, but also ongoing monitoring there as well,
yeah,
Nick. That's also super important, making sure that that information stays current. Let's say, the first use case that we talked about, the car rental space, right? We need to make sure that the driver's license that you have in your wallet has not been revoked by a recent accident that you had, or the points that you have on your driver's license didn't invalidate your driver's license. So that's where companies like Signicat come into play, where first of all, issuing those attributes into the wallet and making sure that they are they are correct, but then those attributes are attested and also verified on an ongoing basis whenever they are used.
yeah. And the power of credentials is that you can do that instantly as well, isn't it? But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a very good point. Um, in terms of kind of strategies that you've implemented, what are some of the ones at Signicat that have proven the most effective? Like you spoke about when we talked about the key performance indicators and the things that you're most concerned with, Pinar. You talked about conversion rates, which of course has the kind of drop off element to it. So people or users that don't necessarily complete the onboarding process entirely. What are your most effective strategies to minimize those drop offs?
Yeah, really great question. And the most important thing here is the user experience, keeping it as smooth as possible without friction, but also at the same time doing the necessary checks so that the onboarding organization has the data that they need in order to make the calls that they need to make. And we have been optimizing our workflows over time to minimize the drop-offs based on experience. And there's also an element of experimentation here. But this could be, for example, changing the order of the data that we ask for from the users, starting with the most onerous processes. Like, for example, in Germany, if you have to do a micropayment, that's where the sort of users drop off the most. So start with that process, for example. And as the other sort of thing as well is doing the data gathering, mostly as behind the scenes. So if the customer gives you some essential pieces of information, then what you can do in the background is collect the additional data from different registries by doing the lookups yourself, while at the same time optimizing the cost here. Another way is to basically simply pick up the abandoning users by contacting them later and inviting them to complete the process. So there are multiple things that we use in order to achieve very high conversion rates.
And I guess at some point soon we'll all be getting used to accepting credentials from others as well. So whether and we might all have our own criteria for what we think is appropriate. But for example, if you had a bank that was passing a credential to a user and that user was maybe onboarding to Signicat, for example, and using a credential from a bank, if Signicat chose to accept that and trusted that credential, that could also significantly improve onboarding rates on your side as well, because there'd be much less information that you may need to check or verify with that individual. So that may have an impact for us in future as well.
Yes, of course. Signicat usually doesn't do the sort of the onboarding, but we make sure that the data during the onboarding process is correct and verified and corroborated. But essentially, yes.
Your own background, Pinar, when we're talking about at the start, kind of introducing yourself, like you talked a little bit about WorldPay and your experiences there. Obviously, Barclay card, I think it was as well.
Yes.
So you've a strong background in payments, and obviously with wallets. Someone from the Web3 space are familiar with wallets not only from Identi3 but also from a kind of crypto payments. But of course now we've all got Apple Wallet and Google Wallet, so wallets are everywhere right now. And so, you get wallets for identity, wallets for kind of fund transfer and kind of value storage and things like that. What is your view of the wallet market today? Like everyone, it seems, has their own wallet today. And of course, we're not going to want as users to have 50 wallets to download for different use cases. But do you think people will have multiple wallets, or do you think that we're all going to look for just one that can do, or a minimal number possible that can do as much as it possibly can, so I don't have to download more apps?
Yeah, great question. I think realistically, we are going to have multiple wallets in the short to medium term, and we are going to continue to see the proliferation of these wallets. But the important thing might be the interoperability of these wallets and being able to share the data between the wallets. But of course, the user is not going to want 10 different wallets doing same thing. So maybe what could be possible is that some wallets may consolidate different use cases. But I do see that it's going to be unavoidable to have multiple wallets, and those wallets will need to play together.
Yeah, compatibility and
Yeah,
interoperability are going to be absolutely key features. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We're getting close to time. I know you've been super generous, Pinar, for
sure.
spending the guts of an hour with us. So we don't want to overextend that gratitude. So, kind of final question for me then: what are digital ID trends are you seeing for 2024 and beyond, and which of those are you most excited about?
Good question. I think that the EU digital identity wallet is super exciting. Of course, that's not going to finish until 2025. Maybe it may sort of move into 2026. But I don't think that the wallets and wallet use cases are going to wait for the end of large-scale pilots. I think we see already lots of actors creating their own wallets. Signicat has a really great, exciting role in the wallet space, both in terms of issuing the information into the wallets, but also helping relying parties get the data out of the wallets, and also helping users do stuff with the wallets, as well as potentially becoming a qualified attestation provider for issuing data into the wallet. So there are sort of really exciting things in that space that doesn't have to wait for the conclusion of large-scale pilots. The other thing that I'm super excited about is this concept of reusable identities and being able to establish an identity and then being able to reuse that both like either within the same merchants for different use cases or across merchants or across verticals. And this is something that's going to be super convenient for the user, but also reducing the costs for the merchants. So that's, I think, going to be a really exciting development in the industry.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And yeah, it's encouraging to hear like big businesses, of which Signicat is obviously one, talk about the proliferation and use of these wallets prior to them becoming more accepted by kind of governments and things. I agree, we're going to see that move, I think, quite quickly and pick up pace this year, which is really exciting. Pinar, is there anything else that you wanted to pass on to our audience before we wrap up?
No, it's been a pleasure, and I'm really excited about the digital identity space. I think the listeners should look out for new developments here, and hopefully we are sort of together as an industry will be establishing more trust in the digital world with these digital identities, because I think there's a huge potential there.
Yeah, I very much agree. Pinar Alpay, thank you for coming on Identi3.
Thanks very much, Nick.